Welcome everyone to this week's CWR Live with Mark Borax. We are continuing the Great Unmasking. So this is part 4. And the theme today is the uncontestable rightfulness of your being. And yeah, thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to turn it over to you, Mark. I don't have any further announcements today.
Yeah, I'm wondering why. Oh, okay, here's some more people coming on. Okay. Welcome everybody to CWR Live for Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. The year with 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions in April, June, and September, which is why I'm calling this year the Great Unmasking. Today I'm tackling part 4 of that theme, the uncontestable rightfulness of your being, which is a topic that I don't see addressed anywhere. It's kind of an original topic that I've been working on, I guess, for many decades, but I really don't see other people address this topic. And it has to do with making peace with existence on a core level that's so ongoing and consistent that your default becomes to love and accept yourself, and the anomaly that occurs once in a while is you stray from that. I don't think this is the case primarily around the world in human nature. I think it's the other way around, which is, as a default, people doubt themselves, maybe nowadays more than ever. And occasionally they kind of fall in love with themselves and accept themselves on a very deep level. I've been working to reverse that process since I created soul level astrology back in 1987, because my work is aimed at identifying your unique core self that's tucked inside all the other various selves, the conditioned selves, the acquired selves, the false selves, the artificial selves, the places you hide from yourself. And because soul level astrology is aimed at identifying and supporting the you inside you, I've come up with this idea of the uncontestable rightfulness of your being. It requires a combination of two qualities to make deep peace with your basic existence in a firm, consistent way. One of those qualities is deep, unconditional acceptance of who you are as just a basic human being. And the other quality is penetrating insight to catch yourself when you're not doing that, when you're straying from that. These are the two behavioral features it takes to claim the uncontestable rightfulness of your being. You need the unconditional acceptance, which is probably the most important of the two qualities, in the sense that until your own existence is claimed and felt and inhabited and understood on its most basic foundational level, your energy field is always contested territory. various forces and energies are vying for your direction. Some of those forces are in your own head, the places where you've come to doubt yourself, your basic existence. Throughout today's CWR Live, I'm going to be referring to the rightfulness of your own basic existence. I'm distinguishing that from the idea that you could never do no wrong. I'm not presenting the idea that you're perfect and can do no wrong. That's not at all a part of this. What I'm presenting is that until your basic right to take up space in this universe is beyond all question, with the same presence of a mountain, it's pretty hard to look up and doubt that that mountain exists. It would take quite a blurring of your sensory faculties to ignore the mountain, to question the mountain as if it exists. Or let's say to question Earth, to question whether your planet exists, to question whether the sun exists. It would take quite a rampant imagination or complete detachment from your sensory faculties to doubt the existence of Earth or air or a mountain. And when that same unquestionable right to exist is granted oneself, you become like air, like a mountain, like a planet. You become a fact of the universe. The universe is just going to have to work itself around the fact of you. Just like the universe has to work itself around the fact that a planet exists, that a star system exists, that a mountain exists. And so on a very deep level, probably the most crucial of these two necessary features is unconditional acceptance of your own nature. That power, because it is a power, that creative art, because it is an art, the life art of your own existence is an art just as much as painting and sculpture. There's a way to live that that advances the art of being you, and it's a unique art because nobody else has that one. And when the art of you is no longer subject to debate from any part of you or anyone else, you cement the most crucial of the two features into place, the unconditional acceptance of yourself. And again, I'm distinguishing unconditional acceptance of yourself is much different than accepting that everything you do is right. Everything you do is beyond question. That's not at all what I'm saying. It's much deeper than that. It's not about the things you do. It's accepting your beingness, your isness. It's gaining a presence. And the presence is the combination of your greater self and your very human self, because each of us has a greater self and a very human self. And it's also true that both selves are one. So it's just kind of an educational breakdown to look at it that way, that you have a very human self and a higher nature. But it serves, even if there's some artifice in it, because the higher part of you is your cosmic knowingness. It's the part of you that's absolutely linked with higher spiritual planes, the part of you that actually remembers everything you've gone through in every past life, the part of you that remembers being in a different body and having died and then having been born again and lived a whole life and then having died and then having been gone for a while and then having been born again. There's a part of you that actually remembers everything you've gone through in all of your incarnations. It's not necessary to have constant access to that cosmic part of your own nature, because here on Earth, there's a lot of other things that often need attending to, like your body, for example, and your finances and your digestive process and your friends and your family and your lungs and, you know, kind of optional, non-important things like breathing and stuff like that. So it's not required of you that your higher cosmic nature be in complete control over your life every day, because if you were, it would reduce the accent on all the earthy physical things that are very important here while we're here. But it is very important to occasionally take on the perspective of your higher nature. And it also is masterful to gain the ability to look at yourself and what's going on in your world from the viewpoint of your higher self whenever you need to. So the more that you strengthen your ability to claim the vantage point from your higher nature and look down upon this little human pipsqueak who's running around in a very strange time of history, trying to make sense of each day's new set of bizarre circumstances. We're in the pudding. We're in the tremendous transition zone. And normally when people talk about transition zones, you know, they might mean, you know, an hour or a day or a week or a year, but we're probably in a transition now that's more like 50 years. So abandon all hope of returning to some previous state of security because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen as much as the sentimental and recalcitrant parts of our species want it to. We're not going to turn the clock back to Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons and all those other charming sitcoms that I grew up with in the 1950s as part of the baby boomer generation. We're not going back to Fred McMurray and his three boys and Uncle Charlie and I Love Lucy. You know, it's more like Fred and Ethel stuck some LSD into Lucy's coffee, and you know, we're like I Love Lucy on acid right now, and My Three Shapeshifters rather than My Three Sons, and Make Room for Daddy, and the Dick Van Dyke Show where he always trips over that stupid hassock every time he walks to his theme music, but was out there anyway trying to promote Bernie to his nonagenarian peers, his 90-year-old peers, bless his little heart, Dick Van Dyke, who brought down the ire of the right-wing Trump-loving Republicans for daring to promote Bernie and call Trump out as a dangerous moron. But I digress. And so in order to continue with my original idea here, there is a way of being that is available to you. And it doesn't require that you look down at your very human existence constantly from a higher viewpoint, but it requires that you occasionally that you develop the ability to unconditionally witness the life that this person called you happens to be living. Look at that Mark Borax dude down there on planet Earth. What the hell? What the fucking absurd kind of cockamamie bullshit is he up to now? Holy shit. I have watched this guy for 65 and a half years. When is he going to get his lessons? When is he going to wake up? Don't tell me he's going to go into that mode again. Oh, fuck, man. No, if I have anything to say about this, I'm going to put a stop to this here. And so the more you develop this kind of semi-comical but semi-tragic higher viewpoint of everything you do, especially the crazy choices you make to once again go around a little karmic whirlpool, a little karmic eddy off of the main flow of your river. Holy shit, I'm going around that one again? Oh my God, where is love? Where is money? Where is friendship? Where is health? Where is salvation? Where's the fucking intelligence of my whole species? For Christ's sake, where's another planet? Okay, I'm going in that eddy. It's a karmic whirlpool. It's sucking me. My body's starting to feel this funny way of being haunted because I've gone into this zone 20 trillion times before in one life or another, and it doesn't really ever lead me to any place productive other than to lead me to realizing I don't need to go into that zone. And so as you develop this ability to witness the doings of this cockamamie, absurd little pipsqueak that you are in your human life, it helps to have a kind of semi-humorous slant on it all, because your heart has to go out to that imbecile that you are. Your unconditional acceptance has to stream into the moron you sometimes turn out to be, because we all fail to fully live up to our higher nature. Nobody constantly 24 hours a day for their entire life takes the higher path at every single zone. That's not ever what happens. So we have to soften and gain an empathy and deep compassion for the part of us that insists, like Laurel and Hardy, getting stuck in another fine mess. That's another fine mess you've gotten me into, says the soul to the ego. And, or maybe says the ego to the soul, the Laurel and Hardy inside each of us, or if you're a romantic, the Desi and the Lucy inside each of us, whose coffee has now been spiked with LSD. So things are about to get interesting in the sitcom of modern humanity. And so if you develop the capacity to witness the sometimes absurd choices you make without turning against yourself, as if you were the protagonist on a really amazing, life-changing movie that you're sitting in a darkened theater watching. You're sitting in the darkened theater and you're looking at this movie star getting involved in some questionable and possibly absurd things going on up there, but you're really rooting for her. You're really rooting for him. You're sitting there in the movie theater saying, well, come on, something very powerful has to come of this, even this strange, absurd little karmic eddy, little whirlpool motion off the side of the main flow. And so as you gain the higher perspective to look at this marvelous, unique, not once in a lifetime, once in an eternity which is much more unique than once in a lifetime. As you're sitting in your higher, you're in the balcony of the movie theater. You're way up with your higher self in the balcony, and you're eating buttered popcorn, and you're watching this interesting being that has your name and your face and your body go through her perambulations of absurdity and hope and semi-blindness, and you're sitting there. It really helps to develop this semi-humorous compassion for the parts of you that are, I guarantee you, are not done with karma. I guarantee you are not done with absurdity. I guarantee you are not done with things like 11-year-old kids coming into the view screen and distracting their parents from the things that they're trying to do. You know, that these things are going to happen even when you become highly enlightened, highly awakened. In fact, when you do become more enlightened, as you do become more awakened, you will become even more poignantly aware of your missteps than you were before, because that's a genuine enlightenment. For enlightenment to be genuine, it cannot just turn you on to the splendor of your existence. It has to x-ray the machinery of your demise, the downfall of ego, the pretension of ego, the need to be recognized for the wrong reasons. And so as you develop that ability to witness your very human self, including its messes, without turning against yourself, when your messes engender your ability to turn toward yourself, you gain spiritual mastery. When you're able to love yourself, including the things you least like about yourself, that's powerful, because that's like family. You know, a lot of people have this experience with their family. These are people you would never choose to hang out with if you weren't related to them. And much of the time you don't like them, but you love them. You know, I think this is kind of the dominant experience a lot of people have regarding their family. Now, there's extremes to either side where people are absolutely in love with their family and couldn't even dream of wanting to hang around with anyone else. And extremes on the other side of people who refuse to have anything further to do with their family. And I understand that. But I think in general, there's this sense with family of you don't always like them, but you got to love them. And when you do that toward yourself, then that second quality that I mentioned, which is penetrating insight, contributes to the unconditional acceptance. And this is the winning combo. If you can combine penetrating insight to see through the machinations of your ego, the karmas between you and your significant others, if you can develop what Hemingway said when somebody asked him, what do I most need in order to be a writer? He said, that's easy, a built-in shock-proof shit detector. If you can develop what Hemingway said every writer needs, which is a built-in shock-proof shit detector, but not for your writing necessarily, though that's a great thing to have. I've had to develop that over the last 40 years. And that's what I owe my mastery of the written word is my ability to see through my own bullshit. That's a lot easier to do in my writing than it is to do in my marriage, for example. And so if you can combine Hemingway's built-in shockproof shit detector to catch yourself when you're crawling into a limited space, when you're identifying yourself as being in some sort of a box. And a clue for this has to do with contractions. When you catch your thinking as having included a lot of isn'ts, can'ts, don'ts, won'ts, shouldn'ts, shan'ts, those contractions are contracting. I got this on a mushroom trip at a Grateful Dead show in Portland, Oregon, back in 1979. Tripping my brains out on magic mushrooms, I came across a guy who was having a really bad acid trip at that Dead show, and I talked him out of it I forced him to say whatever it is he had to say to me without using a single apostrophe or a contraction. There couldn't be any int in it. There could be no more nts, nots, because they're nots. Can't, didn't, won't, shouldn't, haven't, mustn't, knots, contractions. And so when you're developing this ability to semi-humorously, but with full penetrating insight, expose your own buffoonery to yourself. And it's secondary whether you expose that buffoonery to someone else, but that's another story. But when you develop the ability to expose your buffoonery to yourself, it really helps to uncontract yourself, to open a positive field there, like such as, well, if you knew of a person who had just spent 40 years of their life getting involved in bizarre, all-consuming sexual love relationships, one after the other, that kept promising the moon and totally disintegrating into nothingness, what might that person be trying to learn? You know, it's a positive inquiry. When you look at the most bollocksed up karmic dysfunctional patterns that you inherited from your family and your past lives and your peers, when you recognize the places where you tend to limit yourself in a contracted state, rather than expanding into the love that you're made of and that all things are made of, it helps to have a lot of compassion and penetrating insight. These are the two essential qualities. One without the other is not going to bring you the uncontestable rightfulness of your being. Penetrating insight without unconditional acceptance of yourself is dangerous, because you will grow hardened, sardonic, sarcastic, negative, bitter, suicidal, hermetically sealed, shut off. You'll cancel your existence because you'll find so many things wrong with yourself that, you'll pretty soon you'll have made a convincing case for being the most miserable cretin on God's green earth, and no one who ever existed even comes halfway close to approaching the level of hopelessness. And so penetrating insight without unconditional acceptance is not advisable. But unconditional acceptance without penetrating insight is though it's less oh, did I just undo what you did, Marcella?
Well, it was Rowan, and it's okay.
Oh, okay. Oh, so
You
you're
didn't mean to
double
throw you off.
My family is double teaming me. Okay.
He's just excited to be in this part of the facilitation process. He's learning some skills. He's going to be taking over my job soon.
Okay. But is that his higher nature or his karmic self?
I'm not sure, but it was hitting my karmic self. I can speak to that.
Karma. Okay. Um, so, uh, so what's a little bit better is unconditional acceptance without penetrating insight, but that's not really advisable for long either, because it's much healthier, and I guarantee you, you will have less tendency to get sick and cancer and disease if you deeply accept the rightfulness of your own being for the rest of your life. Um, but lacking penetrating insight, you kind of shallow out, you kind of superficial your way through. You skim like a flat rock over a lake. You don't quite sink into incarnation. You don't quite sink into sexuality. You don't quite sink into beingness. And so out of the two, I highly recommend unconditional acceptance of yourself without penetrating insight. I highly recommend that over penetrating insight without unconditional acceptance. But um, but you really need both to rock and roll here. It's not just roll and it's not just rock. You really need both. And the rolling part of this is that the more willing you become to look into your own shadow without exacerbating it, the more you win the uncontestable rightfulness of your being. This is a high art. I think few people make it to this state. When I say few, I don't know, who knows, maybe, a couple million or something. I don't mean like 3 people. But I think few people make it to this state because there are a lot of ways to fuck it up and really sabotage it. And so when you see your shadow, which is the part of yourself that's hardest to see, by definition, your shadow is the hardest part of yourself to see. It's the things you don't want to see. It's the things you're afraid to see. It's the things people judged the hell out of you for when you were growing up. It's your most deepest secret fears about yourself. It's your ugliness. It's your throbbing wound. It's where you're bleeding. It's where you're wounded. It's where your mother was wounded. It's where your grandmother was wounded. It's where every woman was wounded back to Adam and Eve in the garden. It's where every man is carrying guilt and shame back to Adam in the garden. If you cultivate the ability to look at that part of yourself without turning against yourself, with that inquiry I suggested a few minutes ago, like, wow, if some guy were to spend 40 years getting involved in crazy, bizarre, incredible sexual love relationships that start out promising the moon and end up exploding radically over and over and over again. And if that said guy, just theoretically speaking, of course, lived in more than 125 houses in his life since he was born on October 2nd, 1954 in Midtown Manhattan, just theoretically, of course, I'm just making all this up. If there was a guy, can you imagine, who's lived in more than 125 fucking houses? What the fuck? What the hell is, he's the puer is fucking Peter Pan. He's not going to grow up. Of course he was with 10 million lovers before he met his wife, and only about 10 after he met his wife. Of course he was, thrown into the dungeons of the soul in his mental imprisonment. If you can look at the craziest parts of yourself, for example, and do what I'm doing right now, which is kind of make good-natured fun of myself, that's the attitude. That's brilliant. That's really brilliant, because what it does is it enables you to see further into the mechanics of even the micro mechanics of how you begin to get seduced out of your truth into a lesser path. And at that moment, oh, is he going to go for it again? That Mark Borax? Wait a minute. Let's see what he does. Oh, it's me. Right. It's me. Let's see what I'm going to do. What am I going to do? Am I going to go for it again? Even as you're exposing the parts of yourself that are susceptible to getting caught in karma and dysfunction, you're not holding that against yourself, but neither are you putting up with it. Neither are you letting yourself off the hook for it. You're holding yourself accountable without tearing yourself down, without cutting yourself down. You're lifting yourself up in truth. Come on, we can do this. Come on, yay team. You know, you're in the football huddle. You know, you're in the huddle. We can do this. We can do this one. What is it? What can we do? Life. We can do it. We can come alive to the uncontestable rightfulness of your being. When you install that, when you install your right to take up space in the universe as this unique, ever-changing being who's learning a lot of lessons, you claim your place as much as a mountain or a blade of grass. You belong. You claim infinite, eternal belonging, no backsies. Nobody could take it away. You claim your soul's journey to exist, because existence is a journey. While you're sitting there on my computer screen, you're journeying. What a journey. We're all on this stretch of this metaphysical highway together for a little while here today. And that journey becomes deeply real and magical when you unconditionally accept it and you continue to witness the places where you fall short without turning against yourself. That's the combination. Okay, Marcella, let's see if anybody's false karmic self has something to say.
I'm not conjuring people's false karmic selves today. Although if you want to bring them, you can bring them. I'm just not going to invoke and conjure them. So it looks like over at Lily's house, Gray wants to speak. And that, I just want to unmute you, Gray, because I know usually it takes you a while to digest. So here you go. Oh, I don't know if it's letting me actually. You might have to unmute yourself.
Unmute myself. Okay, I did.
There you go. Yeah, thank you. It wasn't letting me do
Yeah.
it for you.
Yeah, I like the best. I think the best part Mark is saying is it's best to have a sense of humor. You know, when you come into this life, a sense of humor is necessary. You know.
Yeah. 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 And there's a deep healing in that. There's you know, the more I got buzzed onto this track with my old teacher, William Lonsdale, in 1987, the day I met him, and he gave me the first of many readings. And then I apprenticed to him. I got put on this track of witnessing my own artificiality, my own places where I hide, where I fail to live up to the full, incredible cosmic being that I am. And that's been a long time now, since 1987. And I've really needed to cultivate a lot of deep self-acceptance. But I guess I was born with probably a lot more than my share, because the truth is I've always been in love with myself. And, you know, at my worst moments, I know I'm God's greatest male who ever lived or is ever going to live on any planet in any universe. And, you know, because there's no doubt of that in my head, there gets to be a lot of doubt of that in other people's heads when they get close to me. And of course, I'm being facetious, but not totally, not really, because I've never not been in love with myself, you know. But what does that mean, actually? Not because I'm better than anyone, because I feel that everybody has a higher nature. And if they can develop a sense of humor, like Gray mentioned, in terms of working with themselves and recognizing how the microcosm of them fits into the macrocosm of the grand design of all things, you know, then the further recognitions you have when you fall short, when you succumb to karma, when you bite the apple one more time, the apple of incarnation, they're not the worst thing in the world. It's not, that doesn't somehow exclude you from paradise. You know, that doesn't, when each shortcoming or mistake of your own that you notice does nothing to budge the uncontestable rightfulness of your basic existence, you've got it. That's mastery. And we're all capable of it. That is not a mastery you have to spend 40 years meditating in a cave in the Himalayas to get. You can get that in the real world. You can get that in any world. You can get that anywhere. You have the ability to gain the mastery to fall in love with yourself, deeply accept the rightfulness of your being, and continue to improve, continue to grow, to continue to gain awareness, to wake up to the themes, to recognize, oh, I think I'm starting to fall and bite the apple again. And at that moment, the next time you catch yourself falling for an old limiting pattern that you've fallen for 10 million times already, instead of judging yourself as the worst cretin who ever lived, or the worst white person, or the worst woman, or the worst man, or the worst husband, or any of that shit, if you just simply recognize that the reason why you're about to fall for the limiting pattern one more time is very clear and simple. You did not learn the message of it the other 10 million times. And you're going back one more time to learn what that state has to offer. This is the reason why the species of humanity continues to act out its self-destructive nature. It's because we haven't yet learned the lesson of every other time we did that. On a collective level, that's why there's war. On a personal level, that's why there's karma and limitation. When you catch yourself about to fall for the snare one more time, instead of denying your right to exist on the most fundamental level, grant yourself the ability to change. And this is deep. Grant yourself the ability to change. And while you're at it, grant everyone else the same ability, especially in times of tremendous chaos, especially in our time of transition, which is probably likely to last at least 50 years. especially in our time of transition, in times of friction, chaos, trauma, grant yourself and everybody else involved the ability to change. Some people have a hard time granting themselves that ability, and some people have a hard time granting everybody else that ability. But this is a magic power, because as you go into your next karmic conundrum, if you accept the basic right of your own existence, then the reason you're going into that thing again is because you didn't get a sufficient message of the lesson of what it had to teach you all the other times you went in. And that's the only reason you're going back. It's like a country. It's like a country you grew up in, and then you moved out of centuries ago, but you left something there, some piece of yourself, some piece of your family history. You left a power object in that old country that's called karma. So you're revisiting the karma country where some earlier version of yourself grew up in order to extract something from that country. Okay.
I have another question if you're wanting to take it.
Okay.
All right, so this is from one of our Virgo guests, and she writes in, what about people who are too hard on themselves? Should they spend so much time looking at themselves still with penetrating insight? She's worried that she gets stuck in that part.
Yeah. In that case, you need to amplify your unconditional acceptance of yourself. It's not necessarily that you should stop looking into yourself so much as that you need to bolster, you need to empower your excursions into the next crazy part of yourself. Oh, and this next crazy part of myself. And look at that guy, Mark Borax. 125 houses? You got to be joking. You're kidding. How could any sane person live in 125? As you're looking into the next crazy part of yourself, you need that tone that you might hear in my voice here. I'm making fun of myself in front of all of you, but shit, man, that's been a hell of a thing to live through. 125 houses? I mean, think of that. And so what it cost me to live that way in 65 years has been partly miraculous and partly grueling. You know, that's kind of the Mark Borax combination. It's the 4-planet in Scorpio, Mars in Capricorn combination, you know, year of the horse combination. It's like fucking grueling and more than flesh can bear. And God, miraculously ecstatic, way more than just beautiful. You know, that's me. That's my life. It's always like that. If you come close to me, you're coming close to an ecstatic nightmare. You know, you're get ready here. You know, it's like if there could be such a thing, you know, maybe that's like a good name for a band or something. Ecstatic Nightmare, or Welcome to My Ecstatic Nightmare. And and that's what it is. It's not one or the other. So to answer this person's question, if you're the kind of person who just cannot stop picking yourself apart, should you stop looking into yourself? Not necessarily, possibly, but definitely you need to bolster that looking into yourself with deeper self-acceptance, unconditional acceptance. When you have accepted yourself the way you accept earth beneath your feet, or a child that you would give your life for, you got it. When you accept yourself with the unquestionable love of your bare feet on the earth, or of a child that you would willingly give your life for, you got it. You got it. And you can keep looking into yourself, but you really need to amplify that part of it.
It also strikes me too, Mark, with Virgo, like the Steiner sense of movement. And when you were putting this all together throughout this talk, where it was the unconditional acceptance meeting the penetrating insight, and then granting yourself the ability to change being the movement, there's something about that for me, like how the movement of change actually meets these two other pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just moving my screen here to pick up that movement to see what happens.
Yeah, thanks. And I just have to say the ecstatic nightmare, no joke about that ecstatic nightmare.
I think I got the movement just right here.
I'm living proof.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, my whole chart is heading toward Virgo and Capricorn. So it is a dance movement. It's, you know, like moving toward the sun of your greater being and moving away from the sun of your greater being into the shadow. It's like, it's a dance for sure. It's a dance, and it's the same dance from spirit to matter that drew your soul back from the oneness of spirit into the diversity of matter. And that's something that we all have to deal with when the soul incarnates. Spirit is unified, but matter is diversified. We're never going to have the oneness here. This is something spiritual seekers need to learn. It's that the oneness you remember from Lemuria and Eden and spirit, we're not going to have that here. It's not like that. It's that if you go deep enough down, we're all one. I am one with humanity. But, you know, that means I'm not just one with Gandhi, I'm one with Hitler and Trump. So yeah, you have oneness here, though you might not like it, but you got to go down very deep to claim it and own it and feel it. But what we do have in place of that is diversity. And that's a dance, because, you know, Marcella is not going to always do what I want her to do, you know? And in fact, I have to keep very private in a secret recess of my mind all the things I really want her to do and fake her out into thinking that I wanted to do these other things in order to get her to actually do the things I really want her to. And that's exhausting when you've lived in 125 houses.
Do you want to take another question?
Sure. Since I'm so smarmy and clever right now.
Now that you're pouring out the recesses of your mind on Facebook. So let's see, someone is asking, what if you're totally affected by others' blame and judgment or dislike?
Well, we all are. If you're totally affected by others' blame and judgment and dislike, you are incredibly guilty of being human. That's what you're guilty of. Of course it's human. Of course everybody wants to be loved. There's nobody that doesn't want to be loved. And sometimes you got to go way deep down through a lot of twists in the psychological plumbing to get to the want to be loved part of somebody. I'm not saying everybody knows they want to be loved, but deep down inside, I know that everybody wants to be loved, even if they don't know that. And so, of course, when somebody's blaming and judging and making wrong, you're deeply affected by that. And if you are very deeply affected by that, bless you, child, because you are not numb. You are not one of the walking zombies. The more that you can feel, whether you're feeling on the dark end of the spectrum or the bright end, that is the path of reawakening. That is the hope of the future. So if you feel deeply when people judge you, when people blame you, take those feelings and develop a karma transformation engine inside your heart. When the world hates you, turn that into loving yourself more. This is what I did as a child in Stratford, Connecticut. I was beaten up. I was hospitalized. I was picked on by neighborhood bullies. I was beaten by teachers. And the message that I received from that world was, there's something wrong with you. And what I did with that message was, oh, they all think there's something wrong with me, therefore there's something wrong with them. That's what you do with hate and blame and judgment. If people are making you wrong and discounting even your right to exist, you learn how to take the negativity and turn it to a positive. The more that somebody hates you, the more you have to love yourself. The more that somebody ignores you and misrepresents you, the more you have to understand yourself. The more that somebody calls you stupid, you have to wake up to your own unique creative way of looking at things, which is different than everybody else's. And so don't turn down your feelings. Do not judge yourself for feeling horrible when people hurt you, when people blame you, when people diss you. Just use that to claim the rightfulness of your being.
Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful. And we're going to have to wrap up.
Oh, you still have that thing going?
I do.
Okay. Okay, then. This has been part 4 of the Great Unmasking, connected to Jupiter-conjunct-Pluto in April, June, and September of this year. And the uncontestable rightfulness of your being, which is very dependent upon 2 features: unconditional acceptance of yourself and penetrating insight of your illusions. By the way, when the College of Visionaries and Wizards takes its semester break for June, July, and August, I will be pausing my weekly CWR lives. So we have about a month left of these weekly broadcasts, and then I'm going to take June, July, and August off. I'll come back in September, but we're going to put I'm going to put up some social media recordings, some brief little moments during those 3 months that we're off. So stay tuned for those. Thank you for joining me today with both your higher nature and your absurd human self. And always remember, I love Lucy on acid, Dick Van Dyke tripping over the hassock, my 3 shapeshifters, and
The ecstatic nightmare.
the ecstatic nightmare of the bizarre human being who's lived in more than 125 houses. Thank you, everybody. Until we bizarrely meet again, take your uncontestable rightfulness and do whatever the fuck you want with it.
Amen.
My goodness.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Aloha.
letting us be part of your ecstatic nightmare this morning. Ah!
All right, thanks.
Aloha.
Bye. Aloha, everyone.
Bye.